As we start right now, I shall start from something very generic to specific things so as to move from the known to the unknown. Um, I'm assuming that there's a mix of attendees on this call, of both those who identify as men and as women. And now I shall make a few statements and share a few facts. Gender and sex, I repeat, gender and sex are almost always conflated. Conflated, confused. While we have all grown up in school and colleges, educational institutions, and places of work, using both the terms synonymously and interchangeably. For instance, if one were to go back to books of English grammar or application forms that would have been filled as people enrolled into courses or applied for jobs, we have seen these two words, gender and sex, used almost interchangeably and synonymously, when they are quite not. They are quite not the same. Now, I will throw a few questions so as to make it not entirely a monologue from my side. Any guesses or any takes on what uh, the difference is between gender and sex? When I speak of sex, I am not talking about sexual acts between people. I'm not talking about sexual acts. I'm talking about the biological sex that is assigned to a baby as a baby is born. Yeah, when a baby is born, when the nurse or the midwife uh, sees the baby, the nurse or the doctor tends to announce something like "ladka hua," "ladki hui," "abbai putted," "ammai puttindi," and so on and so forth. So we are talking about biological sex and gender. Any takes, guesses, or takes on the difference between the two? I'm asking you all a question.
Could you please repeat it? I'm sorry.
Any guesses or takes on the difference between biological sex and gender? Gender మరియు biological sex లో ఉన్న వ్యత్యాసం ఏమిటి? ఊహించి చెప్పగలరా అని ప్రశ్న అడుగుతున్నాను.
Uh, I, I think to me, gender is something that what we feel from inside, and uh, sex is something that is like doctor assigns to us when as you said. I think that's the difference, maybe from my point of view.
Right. You are quite spot on. You are not wrong. You are right at many levels. Now, incidentally uh, and for various reasons, both biological sex and gender are assigned at birth. Both are determined as of now, looking at the bodies of babies, looking at their anatomy, their genitalia, and their external physiological characteristics. Now, even before we look at gender, even before we go to understand gender, let us for a while just examine biological sex for 5 minutes or so. Now, biological sex is itself not binary. I repeat, biological sex is itself not binary. And what do we mean by this? Binary, as students of engineering who would have studied you would know that binary just has two options, 0 or 1, yes and no, male and female, and so on. When babies are born itself, not all babies are born the same. Some babies are assigned male at birth, some are assigned female at birth, and there could be babies who the medical staff, the healthcare staff, find it difficult to assign a label of either male or female. There are many such permutations and combinations, many possibilities, and I'm not a biologist to tell you all the possibilities, but I shall just tell you a few. But there are many possibilities. A possibility one is one where the baby has no genitalia, no external genitalia, and it's clearly very confusing for the midwife or the nurse or the doctor, the healthcare professional to put a label onto the baby. Possibility two is that of a baby being born with both genitalia, both male and female. Even then, it is difficult for the healthcare provider, the doctor, the medical professional, to nurse, midwife, to assign gender or sex. Possibility three. Possibility three is that where the baby appears to have clearly formed genitalia of one sex, but also partially formed or unformed genitalia of the other sex, and it's ambiguous. It is yet ambiguous. These three possibilities are externally visible no sooner than a child is born. Possibility four is that the child, the baby, could be born either male, externally could appear male or female, but internally, genetically, the child could be different. And that is not known to anybody and could manifest itself only perhaps at the time of puberty, that there are no secondary sexual characteristics. The child does not, the child, if the child were to be raised as a girl child based on external genitalia, does not menstruate at the age of menstruation, does not attain puberty. The male child, if the child were to be raised as male, does not also attain puberty, does not develop secondary sexual characteristics, and so on. Possibility four. Possibility five is that all of this happens. Child may attain puberty, child may grow up to be, appear to be a quote unquote normal adult male, quote unquote normal adult female. But at some point of time, after they try to procreate, at some point of time, people try to make a family, they get married, or they try to procreate. They are unable to procreate, and the couple go to a doctor, they undergo scans, and one of them could be told, or both of them could be told that, look, Mr. So-and-so, Ms. So-and-so, Ms. So-and-so, did you know that you actually, while you were raised as a woman and have externally appeared female and have identified as a woman, you actually have a pair of testicles inside your stomach that you've not been aware of. Or similarly, a person who was raised male could be told that you actually have a pair of ovaries inside your stomach. Or it may not be this, it could just be that genetically they are not, chromosomally they are different. They are neither male nor female. So these are the myriad possibilities. I've just shared 5 or 6 with you, but there are many, many, many other possibilities. So through all of this, what I'm trying to say is biological sex is itself not binary. There is a diversity. There is a diversity within biological sex, which has until now been looked at in a binary way. Now, there is a term for such diversity of those babies, children, adults who don't fit into the labels of either male or female. Any guesses as to what this term is? I'm throwing this question at you all. Any guesses as to what this term is?
What is the term, madam?
Okay. Any guesses? Of course, I will reveal that to you.
I mean, in what context?
In terms of the biological sexual diversity that exists other than male and female. There's an umbrella term.
Is it gender non-binary?
No. The term is intersex. The term is, I repeat, intersex. Intersex. Now, not all intersex people identify as transgender. I repeat, not all intersex people identify as transgender. Some clearly do. Some clearly do. For instance, the fifth possibility that I shared with you of a person who was raised as either male or female and felt they were male or female, if they were to be told at 25 or 30 or 40 or 35 or whatever age that they are not male or not female, they may not necessarily identify with it because they are already socialized into identifying as male or as female. So, are you with me till here?
Yes, yes, please.
Yes, yes.
So not all intersex persons identify as transgender. And there are clearly some intersex persons who identify as transgender. So are intersex persons and transgender persons the same? No, they're not. Not all transgender persons are intersex. Now, transgender is a social as well as it's an identity. Intersex is not something that one can identify with. It's a biological condition. Okay. Now, what is it that makes non-intersex transgender persons transgender is the next question. So if a person is not intersex, what is it that makes them feel transgender? Why are they that way? The condition by virtue of which the mind of a person constantly rejects, I repeat, the mind of a person constantly rejects the gender and sex assigned at birth. That condition is what makes transgender person feel transgender. If you recollect, 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, I said that gender and sex are almost always assigned at birth. That was a statement I made, that gender and sex are always assigned at birth. Now, if a person were to align with the gender and sex assigned to them at birth, there isn't much of a conflict, there isn't a problem. But what if a person is assigned male or if another person is assigned female and they do not identify at all with that assigned gender and sex? Then that creates problems for that person, and that person may not find the society in which he, she, or they live very conducive to accepting them. This condition, by virtue of which the mind constantly rejects the body, particularly the genitalia, the gender and sex assigned to that person, is called gender dysphoria or gender incongruence. I repeat, this condition is called gender dysphoria or gender incongruence. The Americans who use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, they call it gender dysphoria. While the World Health Organization doesn't use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, they use what is called the International Classification of Diseases, ICD, and the one in use right now, in force right now, is ICD-11. ICD-11 calls it gender incongruence. Now, these conditions were pathologized earlier. I repeat, these conditions were pathologized earlier. Pathology is the study of diseases and disorders. Earlier, they were not called gender dysphoria or gender incongruence. They were earlier called gender identity disorder, GID. Eventually, with the advancements in science, in life sciences, in social sciences, in technology, in psychiatry, in psychology, in genetics, scientists realized that there's not much that anybody can do about it. And there's no point trying to treat people for them to change because that's the way they are. Earlier, the debate was framed as nature versus nurture. I repeat, the debate earlier was framed as nature versus nurture, as though it is a choice. But now there's overwhelming evidence to support which is why the World Health Organization depathologized it. Homosexuality was depathologized long ago by the World Health Organization, as well as the American Society of Psychologists and Psychiatrists. And it was removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, as well as from the International Classification of Diseases, way back in the 70s. And much later, gender identity disorder as well was depathologized. But that's not something that has been clearly reflected in India, because our Indian Medical Council of India has not acted on it. So it is yet unfortunately pathologized, but and there are many medical practitioners, doctors who make a quick unethical buck out of it by selling falsehood as hopes, with falsehood and pseudoscience masquerading as science. Unethical doctors sell unscientific aversion, conversion, and reparative therapy. Aversion, conversion, or reparative therapy is the pseudoscience that masquerades as science, tries to commercialize, tries to sell hope when it actually perpetuates despair. I repeat, it tries to sell quote unquote hope for money at exorbitant prices when it only perpetuates despair, when it only furthers despair. Many countries have banned aversion, conversion, or reparative therapy, particularly against children, because children don't even know what they're being put through. But the Medical Council of India has not acted in India yet, although the Mental Health Care Act has taken that into account, that nobody should be forced into any such therapies. Now, I have a question for you all, and I'd like people to answer based on their, this is not very technical at all. This is something that you would have noticed on a day-to-day basis. You've seen transgender people, you may not know transgender people in person, but wherever you saw transgender people, you would have seen them. So what are those places where you would have seen transgender people most of the time? Where do you recollect seeing transgender persons? Question.
I saw them in traffic, basically, on roads near bus stop.
Okay, okay. On roads, at traffic signals, in trains, at shops, railway stations. Yes, I can see the chat. Yes, these are all the places where you would have seen. I'm just about to sneeze. I'm just going to go off the video for 1 or 2 minutes, please. I'm just about to sneeze. Hello, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so do bear with me. I am...
No, we understand.
Yeah, so also my father's cooking something in the kitchen, so, and I can yet get that the tadka smell, and it's irritating me. What did I say? Yes, you've mostly noticed transgender persons at railway stations, at bus stops, at traffic signals, shops. What were they doing there? What did you find them doing?
Yeah, mostly asking money.
Seeking money, begging. So you're right, uh, mostly begging. So incidentally, unfortunately, pushed to the fringes, pushed to the fringes of society, uh, transgender persons have largely pushed to the fringes and margins of society. Transgender persons have largely been dependent on just 2 to 3 livelihoods. The first being begging, the second being sex work. If at night, if you were returning home or going out after 8, 9, 10, you would have also seen transgender persons all dolled up in lots of makeup and wearing some very revealing clothes or very flashy clothes, seeking clients for sex work on roads, at footpaths, at dark, shady corners, and so on. So that's the second one. The third one being offering blessings at auspicious occasions. It could be a wedding, it could be an engagement, it could be a child's naming ceremony, or a child being born in somebody's place, a cradle ceremony, so on and so forth. Now, these auspicious or festive occasions during Diwali, um, during Diwali, during Dashera as well, they seek alms during festive as well as auspicious occasions. Now, these auspicious or festive occasions don't happen every day or every week, so that's really not a steady source of income. The steady source of income are largely begging at traffic signals, trains, all these places, as well as at showrooms, malls, and so on, and sex work at night. Now, now I'll go back to myself. I happen to be the only child born to my parents, born to my father and my mother. But when I was, my mother happens to be the second wife of my father. My father was married earlier. His first wife, delivered a boy baby, delivered my step elder brother, and she died during delivery. So after some 10 years of losing his wife, my father married again. And I was born perhaps 11 years after my step elder brother. So you see, as a child, I was I was raised as a boy, but I was quite a feminine, a quote unquote, a feminine child. Also, my parents were quite elderly. My father was 50 when he married my mother, who was 44. When I was born, within a year, my mother was 45 and my father was 51. My mother's not alive anymore. My father is around. He's 91 and I'm 40. So now, my step elder brother never took to me very kindly. He was extremely ashamed of me and my effeminate, quote unquote, effeminate behavior. And he was quite a nasty step elder brother. He was violent, so was my father from time to time. And this is not about me, but what I'm trying to do right now is give you a certain example, because I'm not comfortable sharing the examples of other people without their consent, right? So let's examine my case for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll move from the personal to the socio-economic and the politico-legal. And my experiences are just not mine. These are not limited to me, and this is just not about me. These are very common in the trans communities with many transgender persons. Their own siblings are very nasty, and in the long term, they also find it very much in their own interest to exclude their siblings. Because imagine if parents have 2 or 3 children, and if one of them were to be gender non-conforming or grows up into be a transgender adult, and if that person were to be excluded, the parental property, instead of being distributed between 3, insofar as that person gets excluded and excommunicated, the parental property or ancestral property can get divided not among the 3 but among the 2. So they manage to get, say, about instead of getting 33.33%, they managed to get 15%, sorry, 50%, which is perhaps 16.63% more than what they should get. So often siblings turn out to be very hostile. Often siblings excommunicate and encourage their parents, fan the flames as well. There is widespread ignorance. Often people conflate gender with biological sex. And incidentally, unfortunately, we are a society that is very sexophobic. We don't discuss sex, we don't discuss gender. But our societies and economies and country does it all the time, which is manifest in our population, which ranks only second as of now to China. It's not as though people are extremely ashamed and they're so puritanical that they don't indulge in sex at all. They do it all the time. And we are lost in binaries. As a society, we either call our mothers, sisters, aunts, daughters, we extol them as Durga, Kali, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and so on. When a girl is born, people say, oh, Lakshmi hui hai. Lakshmi puttindi, Mahalakshmi puttindi manintlo, is what people say. But on the other side, there is yet domestic violence, there is yet marital rape, there is yet caste-based violence, there is yet people yet think of saving a lot for dowry if they have women, girl babies. There are yet women who get extremely traumatized if they don't give birth to male babies, because those mothers don't know how to face their in-laws if they give birth to female babies. So you can imagine the kind of trauma the mother or parents would suffer, particularly the mother would suffer, if the mother gives birth to an intersex child of all. That the baby is neither male nor female. Often intersex babies are abandoned. They're abandoned, they're left in the hospital, or they're given away to the nurse, and the nurse will sell the baby. Or they're left at the threshold of a church or a temple or a mosque or a gurdwara, or they're given away to transgender persons, to hijra communes. Yeah. Now, coming back to me. When I was quite feminine and quote unquote effeminate, and I was quite the butt of ridicule in school, and I happened to be the survivor of a lot of domestic violence as well as sexual assault as a child. So I was quite a timid child. I'm a very different person today. I don't get scared. In fact, I scare people as an activist. But as a child, I was a very different child. So I often used to wonder, why was I the way I was, and why do people make fun of me? Why do people, because it was very easy for my own schoolmates to football me, to beat me up, rough me up, and also to sexually assault. So I was quite a timid child. Sorry, did somebody say something?
I think it's by mistake. I'm so sorry.
Okay. So, so at that time, I was I was beginning to face horrible forms of ragging, violent forms of ragging that included sexual assault as well. I'm not talking about sexual harassment. I'm talking about sexual assault. And I was about 10, 11 then. At the age of 11 or 12, around the same time, when I got out of school, I saw a group of hijra people. They were clapping, creating a ruckus, and I was very puzzled. That was the first time I saw. Until then, I thought there was nobody like me. I thought I was the only such person. But when I saw a group of some 8 or 10 hijra people clapping, they looked neither men nor did they look like women. Their bodies were tall as men, with voices like men, hoarse as men, but were clad in women's wear, in saris or salwar, kurta, and so on. So I was very curious. So I began following them. I tried having conversations with them. They were not interested at all to speak with me. They were showing me away because for them, it was production time, and they didn't want a 11-year-old to disturb them when it's their time to make money. When the traffic stops for those 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever time, that's the time when they make money. So they were just showing me a way. But I was quite persistent. I was very curious. I thought people like me would be very diffident and scared. But on the contrary, I didn't see them scared. On the contrary, they were scaring the men around them. They were frightening the men around them. They were extorting some money out of them. They were putting their hands into their pockets, into their shirt pockets, pinching them, putting their hands into their trousers as well and pinching them at the wrong places, groping men and so on, and extorting money out of them. So I was just very puzzled. On the other side, on the other hand, I was also very relieved that there were people like me, that I was not the only such person. And I just didn't know how they managed being so bold and so frightening and so formidable. So very persistently, I began meeting them. They wouldn't come every day, but they would come to that place once a fortnight or so. And over a period of a few months, they began talking a little. The eldest matriarch, if they live in matrilineal setups, and the eldest matriarch told me that she doesn't like to be disturbed, but seeing me, who was very persistent, I would lurk around them. So while they didn't want to talk to me, they wouldn't entertain me. They knew that I was following them, I was lurking around. So they began talking a little bit, and she would tell me very sweetly, eventually, she said, Beta, तुम तो अच्छे खाते पीते घर के दिखते हो, यहाँ क्यों फिर रहे हो मारे मारे हमारे साथ, जाओ जाओ पढ़ो. And so she tried to show me off, but persistent as I was, the conversation started slowly and steadily. Around the same time, my step elder brother got to know. He was told by his friends or relatives saw, and I was getting thrashed to pulp at home for being seen with Hijra people. As I told you, my step elder brother was some 11 years my senior, and he got into NDA at the age of 17 or 18. He got into the Indian Air Force. So he was the crown of the jewel on my father's crown. You can imagine how parents are, unfortunately, heavily biased about engineering or professional courses, as they're called. And here was his son, who not only got into something to do with science and the Indian Air Force, but his entire education was free. And he had a job after education, which was a Government of India job, which was pensionable and so on. So soon after my 10th exams, I was 15. My step elder brother was 26. He had a quote unquote a very good alliance from a very rich business family. That and that was supposed to be a very good alliance, but they had a condition. हमारे बेटी के ससुराल में हिजड़ा नहीं होना चाहिए. మా అమ్మాయి మెట్టినింట్లో కొజ్జవాళ్ళు ఉండకూడదు. So I was necked out of my house when I was 15. That's not an age when one has the skills to survive in the society outside. I had to move homes. I had to go to my grand aunt's place, or Chinnamma garinti kellanu. She was quite old, and within 3 to 4 months of my joining her, she was detected of metastasized cancer. And within 4 months of me moving into her home, she died. So I also earned the dubious distinction of being a panoti, of being evil and diabolic. So people began saying that, Ido modanashtapu manishi. వెళ్ళగానే అమ్మమ్మన్ చిన్నమ్మమ్మన్ మింగేశాడు. ఇదో కొజ్జరకము, ఈ panoti hai ye to hijda hai, panoti hai. So unfortunately, that was smeared on my face. So I had to move many homes. I underwent domestic violence, and this is not about me. This is quite the narrative of many transgender persons. Eventually, people who said they will care for me, the extended family of relatives, they would make me scrub an overhead tank. I was 15 and a quarter. They would make me scrub an overhead tank. You know how overhead tanks are. They are very dark. If you don't open the lid, it's like being in a dark room. They would make me get into some 10 feet deep overhead tank and make me scrub it. And it's a frightening experience for a 15-year-old to scrub an overhead tank in total darkness and not let me out till they saw me scrub the whole thing like twice or thrice, because they didn't believe me. And I was not being fed. I was being fed very old, stale food. and I was not being educated. So I lost a year. I lost one whole year. And they were also nasty. They were physically violent at times. So I had to move homes. I had to move to a home of another uncle who was not physically violent. But it only took me a few weeks to discover that while this uncle was not physically violent, he wasn't starving me. He was a drunkard and was sexually violent. Once he was drunk, he was sexually assaulting me at night. So I fled from that house. I was badly sexually assaulted at 15 and a half. And I ran away to those Hijra people's homes. I was telling them that some bad things are happening, but they just wouldn't believe me because I was below the age of consent. I was below the age of consent. I was less than 18. I was not even 16. So it was one day at around 1:30 in the night, I ran away from that uncle's house and I began banging at the Hijra household. And they weren't at home because they all beg during the day and do sex work at night on under some flyover. So there was nobody at home. I was bleeding profusely. I was running high fever. And I don't know what happened after that. I seemed to have fallen unconscious there at their doorstep. The next morning, I found myself at their home. I didn't have to explain much because I was bleeding profusely. And the matriarch, because they all do sex work at night and they experience sexual violence, I didn't have to explain much. The eldest matriarch, she said, "Is bacche ke saath bahut bura ho raha hai. Ye bachcha yahi rahega." And she told me very clearly that she will keep me till such time I get a job or till such time I turn 18, whichever's earlier. But she was also worried that my parents may file criminal complaints of abduction against them. I said my father wouldn't even give them a backward glance, that he's happy to get rid of me. He's happy to gloat in the glory of his eldest son. So, so she said, if you think you need 1 year, ask for 2 years. But either soon after you get a job or you turn 18, whichever is earlier, not later, whichever's earlier, you must move out of this place. Or if you're at this place, you must contribute to the expenses because, you know, we all do begging. We are not educated. We do sex work. And while I can keep you for some time, I can keep you for a few months or a year or 1.5 years, eventually, once you turn 18 or after you start earning, people will find you a burden. Right now, because I'm the head of the family, I can shut people up and say that this child is below 18 and has nowhere to go and is being sexually assaulted. So if you think you need a year, you must ask for 1.5 years so that people don't build pressure to push you out of the house. So I used to do odd jobs. I used to sell newspapers, supply newspapers, I mean, and sell, and Numaish, which used to happen once a year. Numaish at exhibition grounds. I used to do odd jobs there. So I lost a year, as I said. So I made up for that in the second year. Instead of taking a year to do intermediate first year and second year, I did both years of intermediate as a private candidate from Government Alia College. So I appeared for all the 12 or 14 papers I had. I appeared for all of them. Every year they have about 6 or 7 papers. But I appeared for all the 12 or 14 papers in one stretch, in one go. And I managed to clear my intermediate and also compensate for the last year. Now, after my 10th, all my education is through distance education. I've never been to a college, either as a private candidate or from IGNU. Yeah, I've done a BA with economics and some postgraduate diplomas in training in human resources management, something to do with statistics, and a diploma in human rights. These are postgrad diplomas. They're not postgrad degrees. Now, often people say, why do transgender persons beg? Why do they create a ruckus? Why do they do sex work and all of that? I don't think anybody, when they are born, aspire to beg on the roads. Ask any 4 or 6 year old child. I'm not sure if even if a child were to say that, they have no clue what they're saying. I don't think a child aspires to grow up and be homeless and beg on the roads or do sex work to be solicited by gundas at knife points who, instead of paying them, sexually assault them and rob their earnings as well. It's not as though sex work is a very luxurious, easy, or a quick job, because people who come are not film stars or not industrialists. People mostly are, there are all kinds of people. There are people who come in cars. There are many people who are auto drivers, rickshaw drivers, gundas as well, who at knife point sexually assault. Instead of paying the person, they rob the person of that person's earnings. So if a person would have started sex work at 8 at night, and most of these gundas come at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, because everybody wraps up by 4:35 and goes home before the day breaks, before dawn. So they usually come at after 2, 2:30, 3, 3:30, 4, around that time, by when that person would have earned some money, would have earned some 200 or 500 or whatever. So they come, they sexually assault, and instead of paying that person, they rob the person's earnings and go away. People have been murdered as well, because while Nirbhaya happened, she was trying to defend her self, and here people fight for those 200 or 500 rupees. So there's a guy called Venkat Yadav who who smashed a boulder on a woman's head because she fought for her 500 rupees, and he smashed her head and she died. Pravallika is the name of that person, who's widely covered in the newspapers, but it didn't hit the roof like Nirbhaya did, because somewhere in a very utilitarian society, in a consequentialist utilitarian society that is very neoliberal and capitalist, human lives are not all the same. We may speak of equality, but human lives are not all the same. Now, we don't know why our Honorable Chief Minister went into seclusion. People say that he perhaps is infected, or he prefers to segregate himself. But you see the kind of treatment his life, if it were to be at stake, or if Amitabh Bachchan today, who's COVID-19 positive, the kind of well wishes that will pour in for an Amitabh Bachchan or an Abhishek Bachchan are very different from if you or I were to turn COVID-19 positive, which can't be ruled out. COVID-19 is almost knocking at everybody's door now and trying to elbow its way into people's homes. So while we may speak of equality, we all know that it's a utopian concept. It exists more in books than in practice. And equality all by itself, even if it were to be achieved, doesn't make sense. Because I'll give you an example. Imagine you have siblings. You have a sibling who's 18 years old, who's say 5'10" or 6 feet tall. You have a sibling who's 11 or 12 years old, who's barely 5 feet tall. And you have a sibling who's 6 years old, who's even shorter. And they all want to watch a cricket match or something, and there's a wall obstructing them. The 20-year-old may not need much of a height, may just stand tiptoed and manage to watch, also may need a small stool. While the same small stool, if you apply the principle of equality and say, I will treat all of them equally and give all of them a stool of the same size, the 6-year-old, it just doesn't help the 6-year-old. The 6-year-old needs a stool, perhaps, which is stool or a bench that's perhaps 3, 4, 5 feet high, as compared to the 20-year-old who can yet manage to watch tiptoed. Right? So equality, one size doesn't fit all. Equality has to be backed by equity. It should be equality coupled with equity, which is a sense of justice, a sense of fairness. Yeah. So now I'll go back to transgender persons. There are many transgender persons who've been thrown out of their homes by their own siblings, parents arm twisted, throw their gender non-conforming or transgender children out of their homes, or parents who've themselves been so ill-informed, so unethically given wrong information. We live in a society that is ultra-disciplinarian at times, where children are raised to spare the rod and spoil the child, where authoritarianism flows without any checks and balances. Authoritarianism is not complemented by commensurate responsibility as well, be it parents, be it elder siblings, be it elected representatives, be it CEOs of companies. There is authority is not necessarily coupled with commensurate responsibility and transparency. So many transgender persons are thrown out of their homes, and many end up becoming dependent on begging and sex work. Now, at this point, because I've spent about 50 minutes, I'll move to the questions that were raised. Can you share some numbers on the educational qualifications of transgender persons in Hyderabad? Percentage of transgender persons who passed 10th, 12th, percentage of people who completed their graduation, post-graduation. I do not have this data. The government itself does not have this data. Very recently, I got some data out of the affidavits filed in the High Court on PILs that I filed, which is just about transgender population. There's no breakup on demographics on that, right? But I know that there are transgender persons who are graduates, very few, very, very few, like me, and even fewer postgrads. While I'm a transgender person, I am not the average transgender person, in as much as you all are not the average Indian. You know, if you're not the average Indian, because I'm not sure if the average Indian is some webinar attending, technology savvy, engineering student. I don't think so. Huh? So also, I am not the average transgender person, because I have managed to earn a undergrad degree with some postgrad diplomas. I have worked in the corporate sector for about 16, 17 years. In MNCs like Wipro, like Accenture, and so on. The average transgender person is somebody like my Muboli Beti, Sonia. I'll share in a very generic way, I'll share the journey of Sonia. Sonia is born into a very, very poor Muslim family, is a transgender girl, a transgender woman who should be 30, around 30 now. I am 40, running 41. And Sonia has many siblings, lost her father, is a primary school dropout because she lost her father when she was barely 7. So she was a dropout from a Urdu Arabic medium madrasa. Yeah, so she can't read or write much. She manages to read a little bit of English, but she can't write much. Sonia was and is a very good looking girl. Nobody ever knew she was transgender. She would often pass off for a very ravishing, beautiful woman. And some guy took a liking for her. She wasn't interested in him. He was chasing her. She was just not interested. And now she was dependent on seeking alms. She used to perform. She used to sing and dance at weddings, at cradle ceremonies, at auspicious and festive occasions. So what he began doing was he would come drunk and create a ruckus at those weddings and scream and tell people, this is not a woman, this is a hijra. She does not have a female body, and get into specifics, which is very, not just embarrassing, but it was decimating her livelihood. It was affecting her livelihood adversely. So when hijra people get angry, they tend to clap and create a ruckus, right? So they went to his house and they created a ruckus there. Like, they didn't go because they had nothing better to do. He was bulldozing into those events and calling her names. So they created a ruckus in his house in the presence of his parents. So his parents got to know that he's chasing transgender people. So eventually what he did was he abducted her with the help of 5 other people. She was sexually assaulted through a whole day and night at some far off place out of the city. And on the pretext of dropping her, he drops her in a cab, and he brings out a jerry can in which you store petrol for reserve. You know what I'm talking about, a plastic jerry can. And she thought he's about to set her ablaze with petrol. And he empties that whole jerry can on her, which was about 15 liters or 10 liters. And that was not petrol, that was concentrated nitric acid. He empties the whole concentrated 10 to 15 liters of nitric acid on her. And he tells her, Sali hijri kahin ki, तुझ पे तरस खा के हम तुझसे इश्क लड़ा रहे थे और तू हमें ठुकराती है साली हरामजादी हिजड़ी। अब तुझे अपनी खूबसूरती पे घमंड है ना, हुरूर है ना, ले लुफ्त उठा ले अपनी खूबसूरती पे, लाइक एंजॉय योर ब्यूटी नाउ। So she underwent almost 20-25 surgeries. We had to raise a lot of money. She was the sole breadwinner of her family, of a 66-year-old mother who used to work at Madarsa. You know, Madarsa is an Islamic school attached to a mosque. And she has many sisters, elder and younger, all of whom, most of who are married, and they've either been widowed or their husbands have died or they've been divorced. So they've all those sisters have come back home. So she has about 8 sisters. Two of them have been widowed. Two of their husbands have abandoned them. Broken marriages. They've all come back home with their children. Each of them has at least 2 to 3 children. So she was the sole breadwinner. She lives in a rickety, rackety ramshackle of a tin roof or a penkutillu antargada tiled house in a basti, in a slum. So Sonia is an average transgender person. So is Harshini, my Muboli daughter, transgender daughter, who's a Dalit transgender person, who's the first generation of learners. She was born to parents who are Dalit and who were bonded laborers in a bonded labor camp. You know, despite the Bonded Labor Act, even till date, there are many Dalits who are kept against their will in bonded labor camps. And there are raids that happen every year or twice or thrice a year. At least twice or thrice a year, there are newspaper reports in the Hindu, the Indian Express, and NDTV covers them, Times Now covers of, and definitely in the print media, of raids done against bonded labor camps. And most of these bonded labor camps of people who are held in bondage are mostly Dalit. There are many people dying in manholes doing manual scavenging. People speak against reservation, but they don't wish to dismantle the generational reservation in manual scavenging reserved only for Dalit people. Yeah, nobody is ashamed to clean their shit or crap. Like everybody craps, pees, craps, but everybody is extremely ashamed to clean their own crap and pee and filth. That they want to reserve this for a certain Madiga community for them to get into manholes and clean their poop and filth. Yeah. So also is the Devadasi system. You look at the Devadasis, and today they're not called Devadasis, they're called Joginis. And 99.99% of the Jogini women are all Dalit Madiga women. The Karanams, the Kapus, the Kammas, the Brahmins, the Savarnas, the Reddis, the so on and so forth, the Jats, they didn't want their daughters and wives to become sex workers. So they dedicated, they glorified, they deified. So these are the binaries. When I speak of beyond the binary, it's just not about gender. These are the extremely dangerous binaries that we exoticize, we glorify, we deify. Women on the one side call them Durga, Kali, Lakshmi, and whatnot. And on the other side, we further glorify to make exotic sex workers out of them. And they say you're married to the temple deity. The temple deity is not going to come down and have sex. So the priest has a go, the sarpanch has a go, all the panchas in the sarpanch, in the panchayat have a go with her. And the daughters who are born to her, are further exoticized and glorified to continue the tradition of the Jogini Pratha, that you're the chosen one, married to the deity to please us on bed. Yeah. So I don't think it's just about gender. I think it's also about caste. It's about class. Insofar as we don't exorcise, we don't extricate ourselves from the mess. When people don't listen to us, we yet use ableist language. Oh, he turned a deaf ear. She turned a blind eye. And we insult persons with disabilities. And when people get angry, when politicians get angry with each other, they have to insult each other. I have seen young college students, I've known young college students, men who insult each other, saying, Vado chakka, Vado kojagadu. Like, why do you have to use transgender people to insult each other? And even if it's not so bad, people say, Kya, aap kya soch rahe hain? Humne thodi chudiyan pehni hai. మీరేమనుకుంటున్నారు? మేము గాజులు వేసుకున్నామా అంటే గాజులు వేసుకున్న వాళ్ళు స్త్రీలే మనుషులు గారా? వారేమి పిరికి వాళ్ళ? आप क्या सोचते हैं हम क्या चूड़ियां पहनी है? So our language is misogynist, sexist, classist, ableist, transphobic, homophobic, racist. The moment we have to describe somebody at a beauty parlor, many beauty parlors have many women from the Northeast. I have seen men and women addressing women in beauty parlors, hey Chinese, come here. So we use racist, ableist, transphobic, misogynist, sexist, casteist language. And it's just not about language. I'm glad at some level that people openly say it, but because if people get overly smart, they won't use the language, but they will continue to carry on those biases. And it's very difficult when people use the right language, but exert those biases. Right? So on that note, I'll move on to your second question that was already sent to me. Our team has brainstormed and come up with new ideas. Can you talk about these ideas briefly? Are they viable? Were these tried earlier, or were there any challenges with certain ideas? Could you really set us in the right direction? So I'll tell you what was attempted in the past. Hang on. I'll tell you what was attempted in the past. People have undergone some training interventions. People have done some beautician courses, some cookery classes, and so on. But they couldn't get bank loans. No bank was willing to give them any loans. They also couldn't get jobs are not sustainable as of now because people have faced hire and fire. Not everybody gets into large MNCs where there are laid down clear HR policies. But people prefer being entrepreneurs because they don't want to be hired and fired. So even if it means a small curry point or a dosa center or skills that where they can be there, they can run their own businesses. And there are people who want jobs. It's not as though nobody wants jobs. There are clearly some people who are open to jobs, but they're very few and far in between. Also, there are structural monstrosities as far as jobs are concerned, because our people, as you know, are dependent on begging and sex work, right? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
So when people beg, there are cases of extortion. Our people do extort, and there are also false cases of extortion. Let me give you examples of false cases of extortion. We don't criminalize sex work. In our mind, I don't judge anybody doing sex work or even begging. Because across many states in India right now, begging has been decriminalized. In the National Capital Territory, NCT and Delhi, in West Bengal, in, where are the other states? There are at least about half a dozen states where begging has been decriminalized. So if the state is unable to provide for homes for senior citizens, for terminally ill, because there are people who are terminally ill, there are people who are suffering leprosy, there are orphan children, there are destitute women, there are persons with disabilities who are not begging out of any ambition or aspiration, but out of helplessness to exist and to subsist. So the various high courts across India have decriminalized begging. It's not applicable pan-India because it differs from state to state. And begging I think it will eventually be decriminalized. As much as suicide has been decriminalized, begging must be decriminalized, because insofar as the state cannot provide for those who are homeless and destitute, those who are terminally ill, those who are persons with disabilities, those who are immunocompromised and immunodeficient, the state also has no business to criminalize their existence and their livelihoods. Yeah. So, and sex work is also something, if people don't have any other choice but to sell sexual services to exist, I don't think that should be criminalized and they should be sent to jail. We have to clearly make a distinction between sex work and trafficking. Are other people being forced into it, arm twisted or forced into it, being trafficked, being sold, is the question. So, now coming back to interventions that were tried earlier. People tried beauty parlors, people tried beautician courses, people tried some embroidery stuff, some trainings, but they didn't get bank loans. So I don't expect this group to boil the Atlantic Ocean with a kerosene stove. That will not happen. And I think we should take baby steps. We should look at a minimum double-digit figure, that is 10 people or even 5 people. Because if we start with 10 people, there could be some throughput attrition, and eventually it could come down to 4 or 5. So I think we should start with baby steps for people. Right now, people are also not able to do any livelihoods because for transgender or otherwise, even those entrepreneurs, right now, we are at a situation where we are all living in fear of COVID knocking at our doors if we were to step out. At the beginning, in April, people were managing to buy groceries, vegetables once a week. But even now, going out once a week appears frightening because there are almost, the stats right now that the state of Telangana is reporting, which is heavily underreported. And COVID seems to be here to stay, not just the whole of this year, but perhaps even the next year, till a vaccine is discovered. And when you look at global averages, average timelines of how long vaccine takes, vaccines don't happen in months, they don't happen in quarters, they take 2 years to 3 years or even more. So I think the whole of this year and beyond, the whole of next year, could be just years of subsistence. Not years of, I'm not sure if these are years and times of prosperity and of people flourishing. I'm doubtful. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. But these are years of just staying afloat and staying alive the whole of this year. And I would exhort this group to adopt transgender persons of multiple marginalizations. For starters, what I would suggest is this year is going to be very difficult. Whatever training has to happen has to only happen online with a small number. And for that training to eventually kickstart, for some money to kick in, all that appears to be beyond this year to me. I don't know if anything can happen this year. What I can think of is those transgender persons who can speak a little bit in either English or Hindi or Telugu, if they can do some webinars and if they can get paid some honorariums, I think they should be encouraged to do that so that they get paid some honorariums for the 1.5 hour webinars. That apart, if there are trainings that can be taken for them, that can be delivered to them online, I think that should happen simultaneously so that time is not wasted. But at the same time, I must underscore the importance of people adopting transgender persons. If there are people who are earning some 40, 50,000 rupees a month, some of you could be earning a little more or a little lesser than that. I think if you can adopt 1 or 2 transgender persons and supply their rations to them month on month, because then if you were to handhold 1 or 2 transgender persons, you'd directly be dealing with them. So their groceries, their medicines, I don't expect you, nobody expects anybody to, put in money if somebody turns COVID-19 negative, positive, because, the state at which the Medicare system is collapsing right now, and the monstrosities, how many videos have gone viral about private healthcare demanding as much as 3 to 5 lakhs to just admit a person and is fleecing some 2 lakhs a day and so on. So I don't expect that kind of help from anybody, but I think people should be open to adopting transgender persons, particularly the ones like acid attack survivors, sexual assault survivors, who multiple marginalizations, who are Dalit transgender persons with disability. There are transgender persons who are HIV positive. Now, I can't name them because, it's against confidentiality. Imagine if people are over a period of time largely dependent on begging and being homeless, if they're homeless living on footpaths, on pavements, they are open to sexual assault. They can be sexually assaulted by anybody. And if they're doing sex work at night, they are, out of the 10 clients who come, 4 to 5 of them are horrible gundas and sexual assaulters. They extort not just sex but also money. They rob them. So many of them are positive. They are not just transgender but positive, HIV positive. I'm not talking about COVID-19 positive. And I think we're sitting on a time bomb. Like right now.
Do you get any help from the government?
I filed a PIL, and we are getting rations, but those rations are only being given right now to those who have ration cards. Now, you know that the option transgender didn't exist till the Supreme Court delivered a judgment in 2014. And that has not, out of the 29 states, only about 6 to 7 states have a transgender policy. 23 out of the 29 states are non-starters. So there are many transgender persons who do not have ration cards, Aadhaar cards, voter ID cards, nothing. They're not on the system.
How about Telangana? Is it the same?
Telangana is a non-starter. It's a non-starter. I'll send you links. Rahul, please share those links that I've shared.
Sure, I'll share that in the group.
There are ongoing PILs in the High Court. The High Court is cracking the whip, but the High Court has been cracking the whip against the TRS government and the Telangana government at many levels. But the government right now has just given up. The High Court, the CJ's bench has said that the government, and I'm quoting the CJ in a certain judgment, the CJ, the Chief Justice of the Telangana High Court, has said that the government is behaving like a recalcitrant, obstinate, stubborn child who doesn't want to study and is being forced to study. It's too sad, and I'm quoting the CJ, too sad that you're not a child, and this is not about your education. This is about the lives of the people in Telangana.
Is there any initiative from the government to help
no, I
community,
can't,
like for giving them putting them in an industry as workers, or something like that, where jobs can be provided to them?
Madam, all that is in the long term.
Okay.
I don't think any of that can happen this year.
Okay, may not be this year, but at least if we are into that, maybe after this COVID is over, then are there any such initiatives taken up by the government? That is what my question is.
Well, National Institute of Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, NIRD, right?
Yes.
So 3 years ago, they did some intervention. They said they have lots of interventions. They are very well equipped to train people. But after that training, they are tied up with banks like Bank of Baroda, State Bank of India, Nationalized Bank. No bank was willing to give transgender persons loans. Like, how will they manage to start? I mean, these trainings are meant for entrepreneurial opportunities, right? So bank.
You mean to say that there is no law to provide loans to this community?
No. Okay. As of now, there's a Transgender Persons Protection Rights Act that just got passed, which is a very problematic act. That's a separate discussion altogether. Okay. The Supreme Court, 15th of April 2014 was a historic and a landmark day in India for transgender persons. I repeat, 15th April 2014. Any guesses what that was?
Nalsa judgment?
Yes. Nalsa judgment was a judgment delivered by the Supreme Court by Justice Radhakrishnan and Justice Sikri, where they separated gender from biological sex. They said, and I'm quoting out of the operative part of the judgment, which said that the transgender person's rights to self-identify their gender is upheld, and the central and state governments are thus directed to recognize their self-identified gender. Any insistence on sex reassignment surgery or medical procedures is immoral, illegal, and unconstitutional, which means that if one were to tell a transgender person, you have not undergone sex reassignment surgery, you have not undergone any surgical or medical procedures, I will not recognize you as a woman or as a man or as a transgender person, is immoral, illegal, and unconstitutional, is what the Supreme Court said. The Transgender Persons Protection Rights Act that got passed about 7 months ago, in December last year. The rules have just been framed, the draft rules, and they haven't been promulgated. But these are all checklists of items to show off to the world. You see, the Domestic Violence Act was passed some 15 years ago in 2005. Has domestic violence stopped? We've heard of more domestic violence during the pandemic as women were locked up in their homes with their own assailants and perpetrators and their own harassers. So laws are top down. The change has to happen at the grassroots, and it should also percolate from downwards up to the top. So, and right now, we are not in a situation where anybody can undergo, forget transgender people, I don't think anybody can go out and do much right now. The rate at which there are so many asymptomatic people, there are so many people who are asymptomatic who have no symptoms, but they're carriers, they're vectors. And there are people who are very ill, but they are not even showing positive, but their CT scans show the antigen tests are negative. So the confirmatory test is supposed to be RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase, polymerase chain reaction. Even that shows negative. The protocol was that 2 RT-PCRs are negative and that the person is negative. Now the protocols have to be changed. Earlier, they said it was not airborne. Now it is airborne. The protocols and the guidelines of the WHO have been changed. Now they're trying to change the guidelines on protocols and guidelines on RT-PCR that, RT-PCR could be consecutively negative twice, thrice, and yet the person could die of COVID-19. So these are frightening times. Yeah.
Sure.
Even when people are delivering rations, I'm telling people, please call the person, please leave the ration like some 5 meters away, 10 kadam, 20 kadam away, and talk on the phone. Don't go too close. Please wear masks. Even the masks, that double-layered masks may not be enough, and it may have to be 3 layers. So either a surgical mask or an N95 mask. Like, what kind of times are we living in? It's unheard of. And our people who are already HIV positive, who are already immunocompromised and immunodeficient, I can't risk them to undergo some training because somebody is, jaan hai to jahan hai. We have to stay alive this year.
Right. Vyjayanti garu, with your permission, shall we open the session to discuss?
Yeah.
A few of them have questions.
Sure.
Nikhil, please shoot. Sai Nikhil?
Are you on mute, Nikhil?
Yes. Good evening, ma'am. I want to ask one question. As you didn't start any trust or charity, if you started any trust or charity, then the CSR funds from the companies will come to you and you may give to the your fellow beings to start any new thing, to start any entrepreneurship like that.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with doing that because I'm happy being a transgender RTI PIL activist. I have in the past, there's a lot of fraud that happens in trusts as well. And I have in the past called that out and challenged it and so on. So I'm not personally, but I encourage people, if they have a clean record, if they don't, not all trusts are fraudulent, but I encourage people. And if, for instance, your own society, what is it called? Student Force is a registered body, and I have not attacked them. But unfortunately, in our community and across many communities, I don't think it is just the transgender communities, there's a lot of NGO fraud that goes on. People take funds, let's assume they get funds of 100 rupees. The board tends to spend only 5 or 10 rupees or 20 rupees out of that and swallows up 80 rupees and so on. So I am happy doing my RTI activism of 10 rupees wala activism because I don't need funds for that. And I connect people. If there are NGOs already, I just connect them to transgender persons. For now, what I would request is, instead of being overly ambitious, if people like you, Student Force or whoever, or even private individuals, can adopt a transgender person per person or two and see them through the whole COVID. So what you need to do is just be in touch with them, have their phone numbers, addresses, and just through couriers or whatever, through those, what are they called? Yeah. What is that called, Rahul? The one that delivers groceries?
A big basket.
Big Basket, places like Big Basket, just deliver groceries to these people, keep them alive and fed, so that else they will end up going to seek begging, to seek alms or do sex work. Can you imagine people doing sex work now? How dangerous that would be. Yeah, at least begging can be done 5 meters away, or some daskadam away. You don't have to go very close to a person. But how can sex work happen without proximity?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. This is Janakeswar Rao.
Yes, good evening.
Vyjayanti. Do you require any?
You have to be a little more loud.
Do you require any training programs, madam, for these people?
Yes. So it'll be good if you all collect a list of training interventions that can be delivered online. That can be delivered online this year, because it could be difficult for people to travel and all of that, right? Whatever can be delivered, and we are very open to that. Yeah. Yes. I hope I answered your question.
Okay. Thank
you. Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
So, like as you mentioned that taking online sessions would help, maybe training sessions would help to the people. Like obviously there are some solutions which are like long run, there are some solutions which are like immediately that we can do. What are some steps that you generally suggest to anyone to take immediately, so that like we can pass the situation? At the same time, what are some long term things that we can like collaborate and work?
So I was personally, I was encouraging a few trans people. There are some trans people, for instance, Harshini, who's a Dalit transgender woman whose parents were bonded laborers. She has some land in the village. So I was telling her, why don't you get trained as an organic farmer? Which is, because we are all fighting for human rights, and intersectionality of environmental rights, human rights, animal rights they're all interconnected. So I have myself been thinking of organic farming, but this is not something. I live in my own house. My mother built the house, so I have a small yard where I'm growing my own vegetables to whatever extent I can. So now Harshini is a postgraduate in economics. She doesn't have a job right now. If she can get a job online where she can work from home, she'd be delighted to pick that up. So I can send you Harshini's resume if you can help her get a job. She's worked with Jones Lang LaSalle, so she's very open to jobs. And right now, while earlier 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 1 year ago, many jobs were not available to be done from home. Even banks now have installed their software in people's homes. IT companies have installed, and many things that were impossible 6 months ago, 8 months ago are now very much possible. Yeah, so there are some people. There is Santosh, who's a Dalit transgender man, who's a +2. He doesn't speak English. Harshini, being a postgraduate, speaks English, although she's from the rural background. She's not very impressive, but she can communicate. Santosh can't communicate. He's only studied in Telugu medium, and he just in January he got, he's a very enterprising guy. He wants to be an entrepreneur. So bang opposite Cyber Towers in High Tech City, they created a street vending food hub. GHMC created. And he applied for it. He got it in end of Jan. He started it in February. And within a month, this happened. So GHMC is not going to open that anytime this year. So he gave up his bandi. They were trying to shoo away the street vendors, they said, you shouldn't be here. We are opening a street vending food hub. And I helped him apply, and we followed up. And Bontu Ram Mohan, the GHMC mayor, he actually gave him a stall. And now the stall, that entire street vending food hub is shut. No IT parks. Like, how many IT parks are operating? Who's coming out? Earlier, IT parks used to buzz with people, and people used to come out for smoke, and they would go out to the close by restaurants and small time eateries. Now, none of that is happening much. So I don't know. See, I can give you the details of 5 or 6 or 10 trans people who are +2 or 10th pass or graduate, some postgrad. Harshini is the only postgraduate I know who is searching for a job. Now the rest is for us to, particularly people who want jobs or qualified like Harshini, who are postgrads. I think that is a very low hanging fruit, because she doesn't have to be trained. She's already worked at Jones Lang LaSalle,
Sure.
which is an American MNC. So that's something that we should be able to do, where she was earning some 30,000, and that's a different story why she lost the job. I'll be able to discuss that later, because we are running out of time.
Yeah. Also, if we can get in touch with these 10 people, so we'll start small, probably with a group of 10 people, and if we can get in touch with them, and if we can,
Yeah, of course. I've already shared the numbers of Sonia with you.
Yep.
And similarly, I'll share Harshini, Santosh's numbers. If you can supply them with, see, these are people who don't have homes of their own. They may yet be able to manage groceries, because there are people who are giving groceries, but they are struggling for their gas. Like, they have to cook, right? And they need money for gas. They need money to pay rents. It's already 4 months since the pandemic started, and the rent moratoriums were only meant for 3 months or 4 months. Now the landlords, landladies, owners have begun harassing people. And, you know, we also can't blame the landlords, because many of them are living on rents. So you need to handhold these trans people, 5 or 10 of them, through this year. Get in these 6 months, get as many into jobs. Now, not all may be able to get into jobs, because you know, they don't come from that background, but 1 or 2 may be able to get into jobs. And then once they get into jobs, they can sustain themselves. Now, those who are not able to get into jobs, they need to be handheld the whole of the next 6 months, maybe more. With, I think people can yet manage without groceries, but they have rents to pay. They don't have money for gas, because you see, groceries, there are yet some NGOs supplying groceries. Somehow they'll manage. They will beg, they will seek alms, and food is something that, and if they can't, they will ask you, but they need to pay their rents. Yeah, so I'll put you in touch with these people. You can handhold them, or you can directly talk to their landlords or landladies or owners and help them out. Because I think we should start with at least 5 to 10 people to handhold them.
Right. Yeah. So we'll try to wind up the session in the next 5 minutes. So if anyone has anything to add, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, Rahul, I think we'll discuss all these 2 issues, okay?
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Then we'll get back, okay?
Yeah, thanks.
You can collect their resume.
Sure, sir. Yeah.
All right.
I have one question, ma'am. Ma'am, so as an activist, so what are your next steps, or what are your set targets to be achieved for this cause in the middle run, and as well as in the long run? Because as being an activist, so besides working on the social stigma, there is a lot of hard work to be done to convince the state to fight against the state. So yeah.
So some of us work with the state, because you know, you can't always only work with the state. You can't always only work against the state, right? So there are some of us who are engaging with the state and trying to bring the change from within. And some of us, and I do both. I engage with state and central governments, and I also drag them to court. So I do a lot of litigation. Right now, I'm trying to, I'm not alone in this. There are many other PILs that were filed in the Supreme Court. I told you the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 is a horrible act. it instead of taking us ahead, it is taking us behind.
Yeah.
For various reasons. Paucity of time to discuss that now. So, for instance, just one instance, it says that if a transgender, it says the biological family or natal family of a transgender person must not exclude that transgender person or throw that person out, which is nice to hear. But it also goes ahead to say later that in the event of the biological family of the transgender person being unable to care for the transgender person may, under the orders of the competent court, be sent to a remand home or a rehabilitation center. What rubbish is that?
Yeah.
So it means that if you're not with your biological parents, you should go to a remand home. Remand homes, unfortunately, which are either state-run or NGO-run, have unfortunately become brothels of trafficking, where the police actively prostitutes on the bodies of inmates. Be it the Bihar case, which was exposed through a TIS social audit, where children's bodies were prostituted, or many other cases. For instance, this doesn't happen with men and women. There are so many men who don't live with their parents and marry against the wishes of their parents. Now, should we bring a law that says that men who don't live with their parents and whose biological families have abandoned them should be sent to remand homes and rehabilitation centers? Because they are also not listening to their parents, right? And there are women who don't marry the man their parents want them to get married. So should all such adult men and women be sent to remand homes and rehabilitation centers? It's not as though these remand homes and rehabilitation centers have the solutions to everything. They themselves have become brothels of trafficking. So, and while the rape of a woman, sexual assault that women face is met with a minimum of 7 to 10 years of rigorous imprisonment, sexual assault of transgender persons here has been legislated as 6 months to 2 years. Now, this seems to be an incentive to men to come and rape trans people. Don't rape women, rape trans people. You can get away for less punishment. And it's bailable. It's not like, so there's a lot of monstrosity in this. What does that mean? That raping transgender people is a less of a crime and raping women is a higher of a crime? So there are many things that have to be fixed, and we have challenged that in the Supreme Court. So also, there are many laws. I got the Telangana Eunuchs Act scrapped, which was an old archaic law that was a horrible monstrosity. I was one of the affidavit filers in the 377 judgment as well. Among the many, I was one. I was the sole applicant in the Telangana Eunuchs Act. Not the sole, there were 3, and I was the principal petitioner. I'm trying to get Arogyashree extended to transgender persons. As of now, even those who have Arogyashree have no relief from Arogyashree in the COVID era. But transgender people don't even have that.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to extend, apart from Arogyashree, extend Mudra loans to transgender persons through litigation, because we've given enough representations to the state and central governments. And I firmly believe in approaching the central and state governments first, at least 3 to 4 times. And when there is no response, I'm not somebody who will go cringe and grovel at the government's feet. I just drag the government to court. Mm-hmm. And some things can be done through engagement. Some things cannot be done through engagement. And again, these are not very binary things that you either engage or you litigate. There's a whole world in between.
Yeah. All right. That was a great session. Thank you so much for taking out your time, Vyjayanti garu. And thanks for sharing your experiences and also a few stories of other transgender women. It was very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you
for the opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think something that stood out to me is the thought of binary, thought of binary that is there in every aspect of our lives, and how we are like ending up being it, that be it gender, be it caste, be it any work, be it regarding the women harassment. I mean, the thought itself is it's something needs to be changed in every person, and I think we are really happy to have you, ma'am, here. You really enlightened us in not just one aspect. I think many aspects that you have worked, and it's really happy that you are here. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Bye.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining and making this session a very productive one. Please share your learnings in the group. I think that would be really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, like I don't have charging in my phone, so what I'm stopping this session right now so that I can save the recording. Is it fine, everyone?
Yeah.
Yes,
ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye bye everyone.